These videos are going up on Torah Anytime, YouTube, and there are people who are watching them and writing into me, and they said, well, we noticed you skipped one of the blessings. Why did you skip it? It's an important blessing, an interesting blessing. Well, I skipped it because it's very difficult. But hey, maybe for the sake of completeness, I'll try to say something about it. This is on page 103. On top of the page. Well, now the title of it is The Holiness of God's Name. I'm not sure the title is 100% accurate in English. But it says, you are holy and your name is holy, and holy ones praise you every day, forever. Blessed are you, Hashem, the holy God. So, at first, on a simple level, what's the difference between saying that he's holy and saying that his name is holy? Here, to me, is fascinating because I did teach philosophy. The idea of a name is explained, I guess, among others, by the Pri Tzaddik, one of the great Hasidic thinkers, and also Lahavdil by one of the great, maybe the greatest American philosopher, Charles Sanders Peirce, in exactly the same way. A name creates a three-part relation. A name stands for something when used by someone who wants to talk about that thing. You have a person and a thing, and the name stands in between. A name enables the person to talk about the thing. So a name creates a relationship. And in particular, the name for the user is connected to what he knows about the thing, what he thinks about the thing. No, I'm not doing a formal theory of proper names. I'm aware of the problems, Kripke and all the rest. But in your mind, the name for you is what you possess of the thing. You know the thing goes beyond the name, what you know of him. He has lots of qualities and a history that you don't know anything about. But there's what you have of him that enables you to think about him and interact with him. So when you say that Hashem is holy, you're talking about what he is in and of himself, so to speak. When you say his name is holy, it means what he projects to us, ways in which he interacts with us carry holiness. Those are obviously two very different propositions. Indeed, I can know what he projects to us and how he interacts with us. From that I could draw a conclusion about what he is, but I don't have that directly. It's not accessible to me directly. So they're two very different levels. And by putting them both in the blessing, it means both are important. One shouldn't say, I call holy what I know, and beyond what I know, I don't have any relationship with. That's not true. But on the other hand, one shouldn't say, if God is infinitely bigger than my thoughts about him, then my thoughts about him are irrelevant. They're not appropriate. That's not true either. The Talmud says that praising God is like having a person who possesses a great deal of gold and someone writes a poem about how much silver he has. So that means to say the poem's not getting it right because it's gold, not silver. Qualitatively, it's a different reality. That's true. That's true. But on the other hand, both mean he's rich, right? If he has a lot of gold, he's rich. If he has a lot of silver, he's rich. Okay, it's not the right kind of riches. It doesn't have the same quality. But it isn't as if he's talking about his green thumb for growing flowers or about his ability to play the violin. He's talking about his wealth. So it's not totally inappropriate to write the poem about the silver. Just have to know the limitations of what you're able to understand and what you're able to describe. Now, so I'm going to try to make some remarks about holiness, and I'm not going to exhaust the topic. I'm not going to do justice to the topic, but these are some suggestive ideas. When we talk about things in the world that are holy, you can give a fairly clear description. To say something is holy is to say that it is set apart to play a certain role in a relationship with the Creator. That's what holiness means for people, for pieces of geography, for animals, for items in the world. The Jewish people has a certain holiness. Within the Jewish people, the Kohanim have a certain level of holiness, the Levim, the rest of us, our level of holiness, the land of Israel, the city of Jerusalem, the area of the temple, the various areas in the temple, going all the way up to the Holy of Holies. A Sefer Torah, Torah scroll, has holiness. The parchments in Tefillin or in a mezuzah have holiness. There's a thing that is holy. When a person creates a sacrifice, and he says, this shall be used for a sacrifice, by his saying so, it becomes holy. And a whole raft of laws apply to it, what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, ways in which you can use it, ways in which it can change its status, all those things, because the thing becomes set aside for a special relationship with the Creator. Holiness connotes value, ultimate value, extreme value. It's not just set aside. A pencil is set aside for taking notes, but it's not the same as having, a voice-controlled computer. But then I want to dwell a little bit on a philosophical idea. When you say something's valuable, usually what you mean is this: I have a goal, or something I want to accomplish, and this will aid me in accomplishing that goal. It's valuable because it contributes to something else. What's it valuable for? That's a relevant question when you say it's valuable. And the answer has to be, well, there's something that needs to be done, and this helps you to do that. Which means when you're talking about something that's valuable, usually you're talking about a means. Well, let's see now. To say that X is valuable means it's an efficient or a useful means to get to some end. But any end is okay. When you say X is valuable because it gets you to Q, aren't you implicitly saying, and Q's good, Q's worth it, Q is valuable? You can't have an unending chain. A is good for B, and B is good for C, and C is good for D. Somewhere you got to come to the end and say, and this is good. That's what's called intrinsically valuable. You value it for itself, not because it contributes to something else. So there, value doesn't mean useful for serving a purpose. There, valuable means something worthy of being your purpose, something worthy of accomplishing on its own. When we talk about things that are valuable to us, I'm thinking now psychologically, not justifying anything, we're just talking about how we are. We have both types of value. If you ask somebody, why are you working at a job? Because I want to earn money. Why do you want to earn money? Because I want to buy a house. Why do you want to buy a house? There are lots of reasons why people buy houses. Some buy them as investments, and some buy them to live there, and some buy them for other reasons. And he says, I'm not buying a house because I want to live in the house. Why do you want to live in the house? Because I'll enjoy it. Why do you want to enjoy it? What? Why do I want to enjoy it? Because it's enjoyable. It doesn't need any further reason to want to do something that's enjoyable. Now, this might not always be the case, but it's certainly relevant to say, that's the end of the chain. That's what I'm after. I'm after enjoying living in the house. Sometimes enjoyment can be used for something else. For instance, I have high blood pressure, and when I have certain types of pleasure, my blood pressure goes down. That could be. It doesn't have to be. But if somebody says, I'm working to earn money, and what are you, why are you working to earn money? He says, because I like money. That's a little weird. What are you going to do with the money? I'll have a lot of it. That's what I'll do. I'll just have lots and lots. Because money is intrinsically a means to get something else of value. You're going to pile up $100 bills? I don't know if you heard about this, but there's a couple in New York whose hobby is to take a big magnet on a heavy rope and throw it into bodies of water and dredge and see what they come up with. And this was in Queens, New York. And they came up with a safe And when they opened it up, there was $100,000 in cash in the safe, without any identification whatsoever. So the police said, you can keep it. They weren't dredging because they enjoyed dredging. They were dredging to find something. So, and what are they going to do with the money? They're going to put it at home in a display case. Look at all the $100 bills we have. They're going to buy things with it. So some things you want for the sake of something else, and some things you want only for themselves, not for the sake of something else. And by the way, it's not only pleasure that's like that. There are other things also. You see me, let's say, handing somebody $500. You say, why did you do that? And could I have some? And I say, I'll tell you why. Because I borrowed $500 from him and I'm paying it back. And the guy says, yeah, okay, I hear that. But why are you paying it back? Why am I paying it back? Because I borrowed it. See, and when I borrow money, I pay it back. That's what I do. If I borrow it, I owe it, and then I pay it back. I'm not paying it back for some other reason to accomplish something else. I might be, but I might not be. Just that's the end of the chain. When I borrow money, I pay it back. So there also is something which is intrinsically valuable. It's valuable for itself. So it's not just pleasure. I'm just protecting you against a certain philosophical mistake. Not just pleasure that's valuable for itself. Doing the right thing can be valuable for itself. And there can be other things as well. Okay, now there's one further step to take. Let me shift to a different term, which will do the job, but it applies here as well. Let's talk about relevance. Talk about something being relevant or not being relevant. Let's say you're applying for a job. Is your height relevant to the job application? Depends on what the job is. Hey, if you're applying to play basketball, then your height is very relevant, isn't it? Applying to be an accountant, it isn't relevant. So relevant is a relative concept. Relevant to what? Relevant for what? Chess. The ability to think calmly under pressure. Is that relevant to chess? Oh, yes, it is. Especially if you're playing competition chess where there's a clock and you only have a certain number of seconds to make a move. What about having an active imagination to explore new ideas rather than just apply old rules? That's very relevant to chess because the guy you're playing, you may not know his style and he may do something that you didn't expect, and then you'll have to think imaginatively to carry on. So there are a lot of things which you can ask and answer whether they're relevant to chess or not. Suppose somebody said, and tell me something, what about the rules of chess? Are they relevant to chess? That sounds like a funny question to ask, right? Because the rules of chess determine the relevance of everything else. It's the rules of chess that make this a good strategy. It's the rules of chess that make this a good move or a bad move. The rules of chess are the standard of relevance to the activity. You can't ask about the standard of relevance to the activity, whether it's relevant. It creates relevance for the activity. It's a step above all the other questions of relevance. So now you have things that are valuable as means to get something else. You have things that are valuable in and of themselves, not only, but sometimes only for the sake of themselves, not to get something else. And then there are things that determine value, things that make something valuable because they have a certain character. I think that's what holiness does. Holiness makes things valuable. It's the source from which value comes. And that's why it's crucial to say about the Creator that He's holy. He's the one who makes the relevance of what you do happen. And that's putting, it's like very top level in thinking of value. There's things that are valuable as a means, things that are valuable as an end, and then a standard that determines what is valuable. That's the highest possible level. So this is a little bit of what's going on here in this blessing. Now, one more point that I want to make, which goes back to something we said last week. Let's try the initial description again. I said a piece of geography, or the parchments of the tefillin, or the mezuzah, or Sefer Torah, or an animal that becomes a sacrifice, or the Jewish people have holiness because They're set aside, set apart to be in a special relationship to Hashem. So it sounds like holiness for a thing is a relationship between that thing and God. Now, we say here that God is holy. Is that going to work? God is holy means God is set aside for a special relationship to something else? To himself? It's related to himself? Can we use this formula to describe God's holiness? Or is this where we have to get off the boat and say, no, God is one thing and everything else is different, and the concept doesn't apply in the same ways, which you could do. You could do that. It's not unreasonable to say that the way we describe God and the way we describe other things will be different from one another, because God is really vastly different from all the rest of the creation. But here, if you remember what we talked about God's being powerful, the description we gave, which is really a Kabbalistic description, let's go back to that, and I'll show you how it applies here. We said power is the ability to overcome resistance. And we said, God, you're talking about God being powerful. He can overcome resistance. What kind of resistance would that be where it's important to be told that he's powerful? You know, what, a galaxy's going to get in his way? Going to have trouble moving it aside? He creates it. He's giving it its existence. What kind of resistance to God could be significant enough to say, yeah, it's resistance, but God's powerful enough to overcome it? And we said the only possible answer is that he's confronting internal resistance from within himself. How could that be? And that's when we said, we don't talk about what God is. What God is beyond our ability to conceive altogether. We talk about how he interacts with the world. And we spoke about the fact that every name of God connotes a different mode of interaction. The proper name of God, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, is mercy. The 5-letter name, Elohim, is strict justice, strict law, laws of nature. Aleph Lamed is loving kindness. Each name connotes a mode of interaction, and that's all we really talk about. And then we said, sometimes, in certain circumstances, two different modes of interaction would dictate a different outcome. So there's a contradiction between them. And then one mode of action has to overcome the other mode of action in order to produce the outcome. And that's where there's internal resistance. If you think of God as having these different modes of interaction and knowing that that's all you're really talking about. Okay, now let's go back to holiness, and then I'll take a question. So now, you have a mode of interaction. The definition of holiness was set aside in relation to something above it, which then gives it some special status. The modes of interaction aren't all on the same plane. The modes of interaction are in hierarchy. In particular, we've mentioned a couple of times that loving kindness is very fundamental, and strict justice is only an application. It's secondary. We spoke about our Father, our King, Father first and King second. Always. It's never reversed. Because Father is loving kindness, and King is strict justice. So, Kadosh Baruch Hu relates to us as Father, and sometimes he plays the role of King because that's what we need for him to express his loving kindness to us. So now, if I take, for example, the mode of interaction called justice, how does it operate? Imagine it functioning. Well, the ideal is where the mode of justice is always looking up. Okay, I'm talking about what's right, what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's just, but justice is in the service of loving kindness. So pay attention and make sure that you don't step over the line of what loving kindness wants. When the lower is looking up to the higher and seeing itself in the service of the higher, that's the holiness of the lower one. The holiness of the lower one is that it looks up to the higher one and accepts direction from there. So the pattern is the same as it is for animals and human beings and geography in this world. This thing is holy because it looks to the relationship to the higher thing, and that gives it a significance in terms of what it's supposed to accomplish. So you can actually mirror the same structure in talking about God that we have talking about human beings and the rest of the world. As I said before, it doesn't have to be that way, but it is that way, and because it is that way, from a philosophical point of view, it makes for like a unified picture. You wanted to ask a question?
Based on what you were saying before, it might be a side point, but does that mean God, like we cannot say God loves us the way we love? Like, so he just acts in a way that's loving. So how do I connect to a God? I connect to a human with love because they love me. If they just act in a way that's loving, I'm not really going to feel so close to them.
Well, first of all, when you come to know that someone loves you, you come to know it through their actions. You don't have access to anything more than their actions. You look at the actions and then you think in terms of what's behind the actions, as similar to what you feel when you love. I think one way to think about it is this: the ultimate root isn't love, because love is a human concept and it describes a human reality. But whatever that ultimate root is, the way it expresses itself to us is love and loving actions. So you're really raising a quite deep issue here. The descriptions of God in the Tanakh, 1,000 pages of Tanakh, there are hundreds of physical descriptions. Talk about God's eyes, God's arms, legs. We talk about his nostrils. Talk about his mouth. Talk about moving from one place to another, appearing in one place and going to another place. Many, many, many physical descriptions of God. So the official understanding is these are descriptions of ways in which he shows himself to us, but they're not literally true of him. God is not a physical object. But that doesn't mean you just throw them away. They're written because they communicate something that we have to know and we have to use. So we use it, but knowing that it only creates a certain impression that we need to work with and that we shouldn't take it beyond that purpose. We talk about electricity flowing through a wire. There was a mid-20th century noted American author named James Thurber, and he reported that his mother would never leave a light socket without a light bulb. Because she said, if there's no light bulb there and somebody puts on the switch, electricity will leak into the room. Because it's flowing through the wire. When he gets to the socket, had no place to go. So it could be dangerous. Don't turn it on. There's no light bulb in the thing. Okay, so he said, okay, flowing through the wire is not exactly like water flowing through a tube. It's not exactly the same. So it's not going to leak into the room. You have to have an electrical source and an electrical sink. It has to be connected, otherwise nothing will flow. But she didn't understand that. Now, is that just fantasy to say the electricity flows through the wire? With the wire there it goes. Without the wire there it doesn't go. Chop the wire in half, it's not going to go. So it's not exactly fantasy and just totally off base. It's just that it has connotations that aren't, literally speaking, true. So it's a little bit like that. We have these pictures of how God operates in the world, and we have a natural picture of what's behind it. The picture has a certain service, and there's places where it runs out of its ability to serve. So we use the picture, and then we use the picture within our mind, the limitations of the picture. That's the general. And then when you see descriptions of God, sometimes you have to ask, are they descriptions of the picture or descriptions of reality beyond the picture, which is usually negative? Right? So, and then once you know there are two levels, you can avoid contradictions. That's the sense. Anyway, that's the idea of the holiness of God, the idea. 1/10 of 1%. And there's only to add, he's finished, that when we say you're the holy ones praise you, there are two explanations of this. And by the way, don't assume there are two explanations. They contradict each other, and one is right, one is wrong. They can both be true. One is angels, because they're holy in a certain given way, and the other is holy people. And the two types of praise are very different from one another. Let me just finish this thought, because my oldest son asked me this a million years ago. So the angels don't have free will. They're created and created to do what they do. And they're reciting God's praises. Isn't that a little odd? Like, it's sort of like, you recorded your voice reciting praise, and then you played it back and listened to it. Why would you do that? It's not like as if somebody else is giving you the praise. So he said there are two different ways in which you can get this kind of recorded announcement. He gave the following analogy. Let's take, I record my voice saying it is 20 degrees centigrade. Every time you press the button, you hear my voice saying it's 20 degrees centigrade. That's one way. Here's another way. You have a thermometer with a voice attached to it. And when the temperature in the room is 20 degrees centigrade, it says it's 20 degrees centigrade. Well, there's a big difference. Both are recorded voices. But the one plays when the temperature is really that temperature. The other plays arbitrarily. Angels are creatures that register real holiness, register real greatness, real spirituality, real value. So when they say what they say, it's because they're registering and expressing a reality beyond them. So I can hear them and I can say, oh, that's what the reality is like. Wouldn't be the same if it was just a recording of the words and just press the button and it plays under all conditions. That's why when we say, holy, holy, holy is Hashem, we always say, this is what the angels say. We're saying what the angels say. We're taking it from them. It's a verse in Isaiah. And you heard the angels saying this. We're taking it from them because they're saying it registers a reality, that it is really so. From that we can learn something. You got a question?
What's the definition of holiness itself?
So I didn't give a definition. I gave two descriptions. I said, number one, holiness is a thing is set aside into a certain relationship to something above it, which gives it its significance, its value. And I also said, holiness is the standard which determines what's really valuable. Those are two things I can say about holiness. I don't think I have a single definition that would capture all of the uses of the word, but those are two things about it that I wanted to say. That's all I can do. Can't do better than that. Okay?
And the human,
Yeah.
the way we grow up is holiness is like something you could envision in an object, like it's glowing, Or is there any sort of metaphysical reality that holiness creates in an object?
Gee, I didn't grow up in that circumstance, but think of it glowing. I mean, Sefer Torah is holy, that's pretty obvious. It doesn't really glow. If you turn off the lights, you won't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, but yes, it certainly does create a metaphysical reality, but the metaphysical reality can be a relationship. It doesn't have to be pink molecules, in the thing itself. A relationship is also real. It's a real connection. And, if you discover that you've been sending emails and you don't get any responses because you have the wrong address, that's quite different from sending emails to the right address and not getting a response. It feels different. The consequences are very different. So the fact is that it really is related to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that other things aren't related. That, I think, is the real idea. In the temple, where you had an expression of God's presence, there was really a difference in the place itself. But because God made His presence visible there, it's also a relationship. Okay, so I hope that will please the fellow who wrote the email asking me why I didn't talk about that blessing. Okay, now let's pick up where we were. Yeah, we had just started, we're at page 107, in Gathering the Exiles. We talked about the fact that we have an auditory signal and a visual signal. And I said that if I were writing the blessing, I would have put the visual signal first, because the visual signal is available usually to a very small proportion of the population. You have to be looking in the right direction. There can't be any barriers. If you're inside a house and the signal's in the sky, you won't see it. auditory signal, that's why we use auditory communication for important signals, because everybody gets it right away. And if it's the right kind of signal, it'll wake you up out of your sleep. Everybody gets it. So the fact that it puts the auditory first means, someone said this when we read it, that the visual one has to give you something which you didn't get out of the auditory. The auditory is really a signal. With vision, usually you get a vision of reality. You hear a fire engine. If you look in the right direction, you'll see the fire. The fire engine or the fire alarm is a signal that there is a fire somewhere. When you see it, it's not just another signal, you see the thing itself. So here, the auditory prepares us for the ingathering, and then it's the experience of the ingathering that the visual can be referring to. And this would help explain one word in the blessing, because it says, sound the great shofar for our freedom, raise the banner to gather our exiles and gather us together from the four corners of the earth. What does the word together add? Gather, doesn't gather mean bring together? And you know that Eretz Israel is a very small geographical area. When I first came here in 1964, I told Israelis that in America you can get in the car and drive for 5 days straight in one line and not get to the other end of the country. Here, if you're going across the middle of the country, it takes 2 hours, depending upon traffic. That's the whole thing. You're going from top to bottom, it takes 6 hours, depending upon how you drive. So, of course it's together. How can you avoid being together under these conditions? But together doesn't mean just physical proximity. It means united. It means sharing. It means creating a single social entity. That's what's important about the gathering here. It's not just a matter of physical proximity. We did start the justice. Yeah, so I think we were really in the middle of restoration of justice.
We finished it.
I'm sorry, we finished it?
You talked about...
And I didn't talk about kindness and compassion. I remember the last thing we spoke about was, you, Hashem, alone are going to rule over us, and yet we asked for restoration of the judges, and I asked, if the judges are there doing their job, what do you mean that you, Hashem, alone are ruling over us? And we said the answer was the judges have to represent Hashem, they have to represent his justice. But then it says, with kindness and compassion. Now, on the surface, kindness and compassion is one thing, and justice is something else. We spoke about this. We spoke about the fact that in a single interaction, you can't have justice and kindness in one interaction. Let's say A is giving B money. Either A owes the money, B earned it, has a right to it, has a claim on it, in which case when A gives B the money, that's justice. If he doesn't, he's victimizing B. But it's not kindness. He owes him the money. He's paying what he owes. If A is giving B a present, which B hasn't earned, that could be kindness, but then it isn't justice. So on the surface, kindness and justice contradict one another. And now we're being told, restore the judges, who presumably are going to execute justice, and rule over us with kindness. And the answer to that, which we have said a couple of times, is that, I just mentioned it briefly about 6 minutes ago, that justice is a secondary characteristic. Kindness is fundamental. God is our Father. And He acts as judge. He acts in terms of justice as a way of implementing kindness. This has many, many applications and ramifications. Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment, the day in which a person's actions over the past year are brought to the fore and they're evaluated, and decisions, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are being made for what's going to happen in the coming year. And it's called the day of Mishpat, justice, judgment, Yom Hadin. Yet there are prayers on Rosh Hashanah for mercy. strictly speaking, you could ask. Prayer for mercy is not in place at the time when the din is being decided. Take, for example, in America, a criminal trial in the United States of America, right? Imagine halfway through the trial, the defense asks for mercy. That's not appropriate. Wait for the verdict. Maybe the verdict will be innocent, in which case you don't need mercy. You just walk out scot-free. If the judgment is guilty, so then, that being the case, you may then say, well, okay, he's been judged guilty, and the law says if you're guilty, these and these are the penalties. I want mercy to not receive the penalties. How is it that on Rosh Hashanah we can ask for mercy when it's a day of justice? The answer is justice never stands alone. Never. Justice is the vice president. The president is loving kindness. The vice president's job is to represent the president, not to go off on his own. Like I said before about the lower level, looking up to the higher level and being in the service of the higher level. So when it's a day of justice, it can't be a day of justice and not mercy. You can't cut mercy out ever, because mercy represents loving kindness, and that's always relevant. So you're appealing over the head of justice to loving kindness. That's what's being said, among other things, in this blessing. Yes, we're asking for restoration of the judges. Yes, they're going to produce justice, but justice, we can always ask for it to be applied with kindness and mercy, because always justice represents that higher thing. In The Way of God by Luzzatto, part 2, chapter 8, where he talks about this concept, he says, the fact that justice is an implementation of loving kindness leads to two things. First of all, it's the way in which the justice is applied, like a father who loves his child and wants the best for his child, and hopefully the child knows that and realizes that when he's penalized, it's only because his life is going to be better. And then, sometimes, in extreme circumstances, where the failure is so great that strict justice would decree absolute abandonment, absolute end, then loving kindness simply puts a stop and says, no, we're not allowing justice to do that. Because the purpose of the whole exercise, of the whole process, is to enact loving kindness. And you put a stop to it because of a failure, then you lose the outcome. So that's the relevance of kindness and mercy to kindness and compassion, to the process of justice.
Could one say that the death penalty in Judaism is an abandonment of mercy and just justice?
No, certainly not. In fact, two things to be said. First of all, you talk about the death penalty in Judaism. Let me say a few things, because there's a lot of just lack of information. Violating Shabbos is one of the transgressions that carries the death penalty. That does seem a little extreme, hey? So he smoked a cigarette on Shabbos. For that you have to die? I mean, okay, it's God's world, God's running the world. Who can complain what God says? But how are you supposed to understand that? I'll tell you how you're supposed to understand it, one part of it anyway. Let's imagine that Reuven's giving in to his evil inclination. He's going to smoke a cigarette. Around the corner come Shimon and Levi. Shimon and Levi say, Reuven, it's Shabbos. It's against the law to do that. You die if you light the cigarette. What will Reuven do if he wants the cigarette? He'll say, I forgot. Thanks, guys. You reminded me. Oh, boy, you saved my life. Thanks. Have a wonderful day. And when they walk around the corner, he'll light up a cigarette and smoke a cigarette. You don't die for that. You don't die if there are witnesses hidden and they see him light the cigarette, then give testimony. He doesn't die for that. The witnesses have to say to him, we're watching you. We're going to report you. You're going to die. We're warning you. And he has to say, so what? In your face. I'm doing it anyway. So what is he being punished for? Smoking the cigarette on Shabbos? No. He's being punished for a public, deliberate, anti-Shabbos demonstration. That's what he's being punished for. That's quite different from saying that he was he died because he violated Shabbos. That's one thing to be understood. Now, our methods of execution are designed to be as painless as possible, as instantaneous and painless as possible. Why is that? By the way, we give the person something intoxicating to drink so that he shouldn't drink, so he shouldn't suffer too much. Why is that? The Talmud says because the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew applies to him. So you're choosing a method of execution that will minimize his suffering. That doesn't sound like abandoning mercy. Furthermore, we say to him, confess the sin that you did and ask God for mercy and he'll forgive you. So the death penalty is a way of achieving atonement for him. So it definitely is not abandoning mercy, not at all. This, by the way, is a good example. If you didn't know what I told you about when the death penalty is applied, you have a whole sorts of associations with the death penalty, which just aren't true because they're not factual. This will happen to you over and over again. Be very cautious about drawing conclusions about what you hear until you check out what the exact facts are. People draw conclusions, and later they find out that they weren't applying to the real Jewish picture, but they didn't have enough of the Jewish picture. Be cautious and check out the facts. Now, the last thing we say here in the blessing here is, in the English it sounds very funny. Justify us through judgment. Let's see, what does it mean to justify? It means to prove or show that I'm really right. I'm really good. What I was doing is okay. Is that what we want? Is that what we're asking for? Just give us a good judgment. Whether I'm innocent or guilty, I want to sound good. Write A+ on the paper. Even if it's, written by AI, which means it'll be full of mistakes. What does it mean to justify us through judgment? Now, there actually is a usage of the word justify. Nobody uses it anymore. But when you're building and you're setting boards and then you want it to be absolutely level, you have something called a level, which is a tube with water in it and with a little something that floats in it, and then you put it on the board, and if the thing that floats is in the middle, not going from one side to the other, then you know it's level. And that would be to justify, to make sure that it's level, make sure that it's straight. Maybe the idea here is that through the process of judgment and applying justice to us, that should make us just. It should influence us to change and become more just in and of ourselves. If we recognize where it's coming from, where the application of justice and penalty is coming from, that can actually improve us, and that's what we're asking for. In this connection, in the 23rd Psalm, it says, Shivtecha u'mishantecha hevi nachamuni, your crutch and your rod comfort me. Now, the crutch is something you lean on when you have a broken bone. That's certainly a comfort. I broke my leg about 15 years ago. Without the crutches, I wouldn't have been able to move. So it was very comforting to have them. But the rod is something that you use to apply correction, which means you get hit with the rod. Where's the comfort in getting hit? And the answer is that when the one who's wielding the rod is the creator of the universe, there are two very important messages in getting hit. One is that you could do better. Because if you've already done your best, there's no point in punishing you or penalizing you. It won't improve you in any way. To be penalized or punished means, because Baruch is telling you, you can do better. And number two, you're being told that what you do matters. It's valuable. It counts. Because if what you're doing didn't matter, it wouldn't matter that you could do better, because better wouldn't be any more valuable. It would be a throwaway. No one would care whether you did better or not. So there are two very valuable messages in being penalized in this sort of way, and that's the comfort in being penalized when the penalty is coming for someone who wants your good. It wants the punishment to actually improve you. So here, the idea is we're asking that your application of justice to us should have the effect of straightening us out, have the effect of elevating us. If we get this message from the application of justice, it can have that effect. That's part of what's going on here. Okay, one more I'm going to start with. I think we're going to check with the blue books here. This one is, the Amidah, the side of the prayer is called the Shone Esrai. Shone Esrai in Hebrew means 18. But if you count on your fingers and toes, you'll see there are 19 blessings. Off by one. Well, actually, there were 18 originally, and this one was added later. It's added later because of the pressure of certain people who were endangering the Jewish community. This one was added later. Well, let's take a look. Against heretics, although that title with the Hebrew doesn't really fit the Ashkenazi version, which doesn't have that word in it, but okay. And for slanderers, well, slander in English, I think, usually means that the thing is false. In the Hebrew, it doesn't carry that connotation. Malshin means reports evilly about other people, and it could be even true. Let there be no hope. May all wickedness perish in an instant. May all your enemies be cut down speedily. Speedily uproot, smash, cast down, and humble the malicious sinners speedily in our days. Blessed are you, Hashem, who breaks enemies and humbles malicious sinners. Wow, that's really tough. That really sounds vicious. Cutting them down and smashing and so forth and so on. So, first of all, let's just pay attention to the words before you form all sorts of impressions. Not a bad idea. Is there anything here that says that these sinners are going to die? Let's try. For slanderers, or malshinim, let there be no hope. A person can have no hope and still be alive. Watch this now. May all wickedness perish. It doesn't say the wicked people should perish. It says wickedness should perish. That can happen if the wicked people reform and improve themselves. Then the wickedness has disappeared. It doesn't say that the wicked people should perish. May all your enemies be cut down speedily. Okay, what does cut down mean? Let's see. Speedily uproot, smash, cast down. Uproot, smash, cast down. And here's the top of the chain. And here we are at the end. Humble them. You don't humble dead people. You humble them by making them powerless when they're alive. So it doesn't sound like they're going to die. Blessed Hashem, who what? What's the closing? Breaks and humbles. Now, as a matter of fact, there is a famous formula for killing people in the Holy Book, which the author of this prayer could have used to describe what he wanted. It's in the book of Esther, when Haman signs a decree to kill all the Jewish people. Those words aren't used here. Those words aren't used here. So obviously, the one who wrote this had in mind not the formula for destroying people. The person who wrote this, his name is Shmuel, and he was called Shmuel HaKatan because he was very humble. He held himself to be very small. And he had a slogan. Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, is a book of mottos that people had to live by. And it may not even be that they created them, because Shmuel HaKatan's motto is a verse from Proverbs. He didn't make it up at all. He just used it. And the verse was, Ben pol oivecha al tismach. When your enemy falls, don't rejoice. That's the man whom they chose to write this blessing against the slanderers and so forth and so on. Now, last thing is this. We're living under Roman rule. There was, like there was in the KGB in the 1920s and 30s, there were Jews, who worked for the Romans and exposed religious Jews to the persecution of the Romans. They reported on them. He has a secret yeshiva here, he has a secret conference over there, and the Romans would come and kill people. That's not nice. So that's why this was created. This blessing was created for those people. And in the text, it says nothing about non-Jews. Yes, a non-Jew could qualify, but it wasn't made to bring this kind of impotence on non-Jews. Anyone who engages in these terrible activities, that's what we're asking for. So I think that may give it a slightly different connotation for what you might have thought and you might be concerned about in terms of the way it sounds. Okay.